Ukraine pushing back in Donbas, retaking territory in Severodonetsk. The Ukrainian military has been conducting counterattacks in the city of Severodonetsk and once again controls about half of the city. Constant, bloody assaults by Russian forces had resulted in its troops and proxies from the separatist-held areas controlling about 70% of the city. But Ukraine has now retaken about 20% of that area. Seversky Donets, head of the Luhansk region military administration, was asked about an intelligence assessment by the British Ministry of Defense that said that Russian military forces would gain total control of the Luhansk Oblast within the next 2 weeks. 2 weeks is unrealistic. It's just unreal, Donets said. Earlier there was a difficult situation, and somewhere around 70% of Severodonetsk was captured. Now we have already moved them back somewhere around 20%, he added. They are moving forward step by step. They are simply destroying everything with artillery, aircraft, mortars, and tanks. As soon as we have enough Western long-range weapons, we will push their artillery away from our positions. And then, believe me, the Russian infantry, they will just run, he said in a televised address. Russian forces blowing up bridges to slow Ukrainian advance. In an intriguing turn of events, the Russian military is now blowing up bridges across the Seversky Donets river. This is meant to slow Ukrainian forces trying to resupply its troops and bringing in humanitarian supplies to Severodonetsk and the Donbas, as well as to stem the flow of reinforcements heading into the region as Kyiv tries to take back lost territory. At the outset of the invasion by Russia in late February, it was the Ukrainians blowing bridges as they slowed and then stopped Russian attempts to take the capital city of Kyiv and Kharkiv. They are really afraid that the success of our defenders will develop, and this can be done if the ammunition, weapons, and reinforcements are provided in time. This is the first thing they are afraid of, Donets said. Luhansk region is a huge outpost for us, we are holding it now. Donets said that Ukrainian forces threw back 9 separate attacks on the city in just the past 24 hours. The Russians continued to try to encircle the defenders in the city, but all attempts to do so have been unsuccessful. Donets added that the Russian military is throwing all their reserves at Severodonetsk. And the humanitarian situation is difficult as it is impossible to deliver food and medicine to the city. He claimed that Ukrainian forces had destroyed a tank, 8 armored vehicles, and 1 artillery piece, as well as shot down 3 unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, and a cruise missile. The Donbas is Ukraine's industrial heartland. The Donbas area that the Russian forces are trying to take is tied to the separatist-held areas of the Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. The Donbas is the heart of Ukraine's industrial heartland. And the 2 cities of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk on opposite banks of the Seversky Donets river are the final 2 cities held by Ukraine in the Luhansk Oblast. Severodonetsk was taken briefly by Russian proxy separatists in 2014 but was quickly recaptured by Ukrainian troops. It is the home of the very large chemical plant that produces nitrogen-based fertilizers. It is also the site of at least 800 civilians, who are sheltering in place to escape the Russian shelling and bombing. There has been concern that Russian shelling could set off any of the remaining chemicals. Lysychansk was home prior to the Russian invasion of Ukraine's second-largest oil refinery, capable of refining 16 million tons of oil each year. Back on May 8, Russian attacks on the refinery damaged production facilities, Seversky Donets reported on his Telegram channel app. Steve Balestrieri is a 1945 national security columnist. He has served as a U.S. Army Special Forces NCO and warrant officer before injuries forced his early separation. In addition to writing for 1945.com and other military news organizations, he has covered the NFL for Pats fans. For over 10 years. His work was regularly featured in the Millbury Sutton Chronicle and Grafton News newspapers in Massachusetts. A key Ukrainian stronghold in the Donbas appears on the verge of falling to Russia as the region's governor began openly talking of surrendering the city today. Serhiy Haidai, the governor of Luhansk province, said Russia is now attacking the city of Severodonetsk from all sides and that, if his is given the order by Kyiv to surrender the city, then he would be willing to do so. Haidai said the decision to abandon Severodonetsk, one of the last Ukrainian strongholds in his province, will not be taken lightly, but that the war is the bigger priority, according to a morning briefing from the BBC. It came as heavy fighting also broke out to the north of Sloviansk, another key city in neighboring Donetsk province, with Russian bombardment cutting water, power and gas supplies, leaving the last remaining citizens facing the prospect of a siege. Capturing the Luhansk and Donetsk regions, which together make up the Donbas, is now the chief aim of Vladimir Putin's special military operation, which entered its 100th day today, after attempts at a rapid victory with an attack on Kyiv failed. Russia has been tightening its grip on the Donbas in recent days, making slow, costly, but steady progress in subduing the region with withering artillery fire. Kyiv says Putin's army is now in control of 20% of Ukraine's territory, compared to around 7% when the invasion began on February 24. President Zelensky admitted yesterday that up to 100 men are dying every day, most of them in Donbas, while another 500 are being wounded, a staggering casualty toll that will be difficult to maintain even as reserves and conscripts are called up. Severodonetsk's Azo factory, one of Europe's biggest chemical plants, was targeted by Russian soldiers who fired on one of its administrative buildings and a warehouse where methanol was stored. Ukrainian troops were still holding an industrial zone, Gade said, a situation reminiscent of Mariupol, where a huge steelworks was the southeastern port city's last holdout until Ukrainian troops finally surrendered in late May. The situation in Lysychansk, Severodonetsk's twin city, which sits just across a river, also looked increasingly dire. About 60% of infrastructure and housing had been destroyed, while internet, mobile network and gas services had been knocked out, said the city's mayor Oleksandr Zyka. The shelling is getting stronger every day, he said. In the city of Sloviansk, 50 miles from Severodonetsk, residents said there were constant bombardments by Russian troops. It's very difficult here, said paramedic Ekaterina Perednenko, 24, who only returned to the city 5 days ago but realizes that she will have to leave again. Shooting is everywhere, it's scary. No water, electricity or gas, she said. And in Mykolaiv in the south, Russian shelling killed at least one person and injured several others, Ukrainian military officials said late Thursday. Led by the United States, Western nations have pumped arms and military supplies into Ukraine to help it survive the onslaught. Bridget Brink, the new U.S. ambassador to Kyiv, promised Thursday that the United States would help Ukraine prevail against Russian aggression, after presenting her credentials to Zelensky. Earlier this week, the United States announced that it was sending more advanced HIMARS multiple rocket launch systems to Ukraine. The mobile units can simultaneously fire multiple precision-guided munitions at targets up to 80 kilometers away. They are the centerpiece of a $700 million package that also includes air surveillance radar, ammunition, helicopters and vehicles. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov accused Washington of adding fuel to the fire, although U.S. officials insist Ukraine has promised not to use them to strike inside Russia. Beyond sending arms to Ukraine, Western allies have also sought to choke off Russia's financial lifeline in a bid to get Putin to change course. Ramping up an already long list of embargoes, the United States blacklisted Putin's money manager and a Monaco company that provides luxury yachts to Moscow's elite. Across the Atlantic, EU nations agreed new sanctions that would halt 90% of Russian oil imports to the bloc by the end of the year. Russia warned that European consumers would be the first to pay the price for the partial oil embargo. Major crude producers agreed to boost output by about 50% more a month in an effort to calm an overheated market and ease pressure on inflation. But the move disappointed investors, and prices rose following the announcement. The war risks triggering a global food crisis, as Ukraine is one of the world's top grain producers. It was already translating into higher costs for essentials from cereals to sunflower oil to maize, with the poorest among the hardest hit. The head of the African Union, Senegalese President Macky Sall, is to visit Russia on Friday for talks with Putin. The visit is aimed at freeing up stocks of cereals and fertilizers, the blockage of which particularly affects African countries, along with easing the Ukraine conflict, Sall's office said.